Full Circle is brought to you by Goods Candy Shop. We aren't just better, we're goods.
Welcome to Full Circle. I'm Suzanne McAllister. I'm glad you could be with us today. Lose It for Life, Every Man's Battle, and Walking into Walls. These are just three of the books by our guest, Stephen Arterburn. Stephen is the founder and chairman of New Life Live, and he's also a talk show host for the #1 nationally syndicated Christian counseling show, New Life Live. It is great to have you here today, Stephen.
Thanks for having me. Really glad to be here.
I have been so impressed by what I have read about your ministry. You're also involved with Heartland Church here in Indiana, but you are picked up by millions of people that tune in for your wisdom. I want to start with something that I picked up on one of the clips that I had listened to, and you revealed that when you were in college, you paid for a woman's abortion.
Yes, I did.
How did that change you as a person, and do you feel that it has helped you in your counseling?
Well, you know, I was very promiscuous. Anything that my parents taught me, I believed it had to be the opposite of that. I was raised a very strict Southern Baptist, and so I went off to school to get a Christian education, and I got a girl pregnant. And I just, you know, did what I thought you did. I just took care of it. I didn't really think about what I was doing and until about 3 days after it was over. And I realized that I had destroyed this life that I had created. And I didn't just pay for the abortion, but I really pressured her to have it. And so the guilt and the shame that just overwhelmed me when I realized, you know, it's a man's role in the reproductive process after conception to provide and protect for the life. And, you know, when you don't do that and then you move to destroy your own child, I think even an atheist would experience some kind of guilt of some kind. And over the years, I've come to read many stories of men that weren't Christians, but also felt tremendous guilt and shame over that decision to support an abortion or pay for it or force someone into it. And so it really was a coming to the end of myself. I ended up with about 80 ulcers eating at me. It was just the guilt and the shame. And, you know, I just felt like it was my job to feel as bad as I could possibly feel for as long as I could. And it was through some people coming to me hearing some good teaching, that I discovered that that was what Satan wanted me to do. He wanted me to feel bad and horrible, but that, you know, I was a Christian and that Jesus wasn't ashamed of me, that he had died for this sin long before I had ever committed it. And so I began to, I really had a transformation experience, and I began to get into the Word and fellowship and just made a 180-degree turn. So that horrible thing really led to a major transformation in my life.
Well, I appreciate your sharing that, because so many people, whether it was in the same situation that you were in or others, they keep that guilt in their life and they don't move on.
Right.
And so much of what you do now is to help people move on. You have this book, we have it right here, Walking into Walls, and you talk about people's blind spots.
Yeah.
Let's go into what you mean by the blind spots.
Well, these are things that really stand in your way of living the life that God would have you to live. And while they're blind to you, they're not blind to other people. In fact, they probably mention them to you from time to time. But for instance, the first one is stubborn resistance. And when a person is unwilling to do anything and they're stubborn and resistant, staking out their territory, saying really attractive things like, this is the way you married me, and this is the way that you need to accept me. These folks are most likely scared to death. They are entrenched in whatever makes them feel secure or safe. And they're absolutely miserable to be around because they've stopped growing. And it is in replacing stubborn resistance with willingness that we can move toward what God wants for us. And you know, when I deal with a couple and they're struggling in their marriage, I always ask, what is the level of willingness on both people's part? If two people are willing, any marriage can be saved. But when you've got one stubbornly resistant person, then it doesn't look too good.
Well, the other blind spots that you talk about self-centered entitlement, justifiable resentment, blind ignorance, and disconnected isolation.
Yeah.
If someone recognizes themselves in those blind spots, how is your book going to help them?
Well, it helps them to get out of it. First, it helps them to identify that this is who they are, and then it provides a path for them to get out of it. And this path is really a crummy path to take if you've been caught up in yourself, because it starts with humility and humbling yourself and being open and willing to take some feedback, willing to try some new things. And the humility leads to a surrender to God in a way that you maybe have never surrendered before. And here's what I mean. A lot of people will say, I surrendered my problem to God, but it always came back. Every morning I would surrender, here God, take this from me, but it came back. And I say to them, well, you surrendered it to God, but what you didn't do is you didn't surrender to the process that God has established that would free you from whatever that is. You know, it's one thing to say, hey, take this drinking problem from me. It's another to get in your car and go to a recovery meeting, have a sponsor, work through steps, go to a men's Bible study or a women's Bible study. You see, I mean, that's true surrender. When you say, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, versus all I'm willing to do is ask God to fix it every day. No wonder so many Christians end up in a sense of failure in their spiritual life, because that's all they're willing to do.
So it's not just a matter of surrendering, but doing the necessary action steps to come to a resolution.
That's right.
We're going to take a break, but when we come back, we will continue our conversation with Stephen Arterburn. Don't go away. We are back. We're continuing our conversation with Steve Arterburn. He is a talk show host. He's been a relationship expert for over 20 years, and he's written over 100 books. That calculates to being 8 million in print. You have been a busy person.
I have been a bit busy, yeah.
Well, in our last segment, we talked about your relatively new book, Walking into Walls. I want to talk about the book, Every Man's Battle. Yeah. What is the battle?
Well, the battle is with lust, and when Fred Stoker and I wrote this book 12 years ago, we were really addressing the prevalence of pornography and what it was doing to men, and the sexualization in media, which has just, you know, tripled, quadrupled, exponentially gotten greater and worse since then. But every man needs to address this at some point, whether they're single or they're married. And one of the problems with married men is they stand up and they commit themselves to being faithful to a wife, and they're saying they're not going to have sex with somebody, but what they do with their mind and in the area of lust is quite unfaithful. I mean, Jesus said, if you lust in your heart, it's like committing adultery. And so men who grew up hearing about soft pornography like Playboy, when the internet came along with 230 million websites, they didn't have a real defense against that. And many of them kind of just got trapped into it and didn't know what to do, and many are still trapped into it. So we came along and we provided a book that had some things for them to do. And that's why it sold over 3 million copies, that book alone, because it provided a way out. It provided steps that they could do. Rather than tell them it was a bad problem or judge them or shame them, we just provided some practical things that they could do, and men have taken advantage of that.
Because this really is an addiction for many men, isn't it?
There's no question about it that all of the things that addiction holds, where you increase tolerance with addiction, You continue in addiction even though the consequences are there. It draws you farther away from people rather than bringing you together. The end result is always despair. Those kinds of things are there with sexual addiction. No, it's not a chemical that you take into your body, but it's a chemical that you produce with your body, and you become just as addicted to it. And you feel like you need to go back to the source to feel normal again. And of course, there's this cycle of using pornography or having an affair and feeling satisfied for a while, and then the shame and the guilt starts and the obsession, and it just continues until a man finally says, I'm better than this. God's called me to something far beyond this, to a life of integrity, and decides to make a move, whether it's read the book or we've done Every Man's Battle workshops for 10 years. We've had over 10,000 men come through these workshops, and we have seen some major changes in marriages as a result.
And we're going to put some information up on the screen, so if someone wants to attend one of those workshops, it gets back to what we were talking about earlier, actually admitting that there's a problem and taking action for that.
Yeah.
When you talk about sexual integrity and integrity in a relationship, speak to that a little bit more, because I'm sure there are many men who are justifying their behavior because they think it's victimless. But pornography and lust, there are victims.
Yes. Well, one of those walls from the first segment that we didn't talk about was entitlement. And a man might say, well, you know, if she's not willing to do this, or I've got such a sex drive beyond anything you could imagine, I'm entitled to this, I deserve this. But that man who finally hits a wall and says, this isn't working for me, says, I'm going to have integrity. Everything that I do sexually is going to be known by my wife, approved by my wife, and involving my wife. Now that's sexual integrity. And if we would stick to that standard as men, we wouldn't be getting in trouble. We wouldn't be watching things in hotel rooms and all the other, and staying up all night on the computer and doing the things that we're doing. So I really call men out to use that standard in their life, and that is integrity, and they can now have an authentic relationship with their wife. They wonder why it is they don't want to be intimate with their wife, or why they struggle so much to be close. And that's one of the things that pornography does. It essentially neuters a man. It essentially prevents him from being able to have a normal sexual relationship with a real live human being. He's so used to the image and doing it by himself.
Sure, and it gets back to one of those blind spots as well in terms of isolating yourself from society.
Yes.
Before we go to a break, you know, it's so important to have this conversation. We know it exists, but many people are perhaps afraid to bring it up to their ministers. But more and more churches are providing workshops like what you are providing. What would you say to churches so that they can recognize this as a real problem and in ways that they can help their congregants?
Well, I think the best thing is for a pastor to say that all men struggle with this, and this is not some isolated thing, and it's not something to be ashamed of, it's something to do something about. But I also encourage churches to encourage their women to make bold moves, because most of the men that come to us for help, they have been prodded by a very brave wife who said either get help or I don't think this is going to go anywhere. And that, well, 75% of those women, I mean, they are calling because they're tired and fed up of settling for something less than what they deserve. And so women do need to make a bold move and not put up with this and buy into the fact that all men do this. They don't.
So perhaps a bold move is to contact the information on your screen and find out more about Every Man's Battle. We'll be back after this. We are back. We're continuing our conversation with Stephen Arterburn. In this segment of the program, we're going to talk about his book, Lose It for Life. Can we really lose it for life? And we're talking about weight here.
Yeah. Well, I used to weigh about 60 pounds more than I do today. I was essentially carrying a little third grader around with me, so I know what that's like. And I've kept that weight off for a couple of decades now. And I think you can lose it for life if you're willing to continue to adjust your life based on growing older. I mean, your metabolism slows down, your muscle deteriorates, you have to be building that muscle up. You have to be in a state of willingness to change what you eat and how much you exercise if you want to keep it off. You can't have a sedentary lifestyle on a Barca lounger, drinking beer, watching television, and lose it for life. But there are many people who are living a life that is full of sadness, and they're dreary and they're depressed. And if they would get involved in getting their life in shape, their body in physical shape, their life would be totally different.
Sure, because many people turn to food to fill them up,
Right.
but yet they are starving on so many levels.
Right. Well, you know, the Bible says that when we encounter trials, that if we will trust God and work through those trials, that it builds up our endurance for the long haul. But if rather than endure that trial in a way that builds our character, if we just relieve the pressure with food, then we miss an opportunity to build our persevering character, our endurance. And so we shouldn't wonder why we're kind of stagnant in our spiritual growth if we're always short-circuiting what the difficulties and troubles and trials are in our life.
Sure, and in your book you do address that there are many levels of losing it for life. You talk
Yes.
about spiritual, physical,
Right.
also relationships play a part into that. Do you think that was a cause for some of your weight gain and then your ultimate weight loss?
Oh, definitely. You know, I had a lot of unhealthy relationships, and I was living a miserable life. And before I lost the weight, I was on blood pressure medication. I was like a 70-year-old guy. And so as things changed for me with my relationship with the Lord, then I didn't have as much need to eat. But what we talk about in our workshops is you do need to lose something else other than the weight. There's a reason, there's an emotional tie here or a spiritual bond here that has led to all of this eating, and you do have to address that. And some people go through their life overweight, and before they come to us, they never think about, oh, so there's a connection between that experience for me and my eating experience.
I read a statistic recently, and it said that 2/3 of all American adults are either obese or overweight.
It's amazing.
So we are talking about a lot of people who are suffering.
Yeah.
So what would be your message to them?
Well, first of all, I'd say eat less fast food and stop drinking all these calories with sodas and things. And then I would say this, make some kind of change in the way that you eat. Replace something that is of high calorie value with something lower. You know, if you eat muffins all the time, try a bagel. And then the other thing is anybody can exercise for 10 minutes. Don't not exercise because you don't have an hour to do it or 30 minutes, but start by exercising for 10 minutes and make these gradual changes. That's what I talk about in the book. Gradual changes that you can maintain for the rest of your life, and you can change your life. All the while looking at what are the emotional issues that I need to deal with.
You know, when I first read the title of your book, Lose It for Life, I was thinking lose it for the rest of your life. But then when I looked at it again, I thought lose it for life,
Right.
to add life.
Yes.
So by losing weight and being healthy and having a spiritual, physical, emotional, and healthy relationships, we can have a better life.
No question.
So in conclusion, as you look forward,
Yeah.
talk about where you see yourself going.
Well, I love being a pastor, and I'll continue to do that, and I'll continue the talk show. But I'm doing some work in secular television to try to infiltrate the industry a little bit, and so far that's going very well. But for the main thing, I see myself being a husband and a father, and I want to be doing that as long as I possibly can. So I'm eating my oatmeal.
Well, good for you. and doing your exercises
That's
too, right?
Yeah.
Well, our guest has been Stephen Arterburn on today's program. He is the founder and chairman of New Life Ministries. Thank you for being our guest.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we are back with Kim Tabor and Finally Free after this.
Stay tuned. Musical Showcase is coming up next. And now, here's our musical showcase.
We're back. If you'd like any information about the topics that we covered on today's program, newlife.com is where you can go and find out more information about Stephen Arterburn, his work, and his books. And there's our phone number if you'd like to contact us. We always love to hear from our viewers. Well, as always in segment 4, we end our show with music. It's my pleasure to welcome back Kim Tabor of Tabor Ministries. She'll be singing Finally Free. And we'll see you next time, Full Circle.
There were pieces of my life I held so tightly to my heart. There was hardly any room for it to beat. I was fooled into believing life was mine to control, in charge of my own destiny. But as the pieces started slipping through my fingers, I was amazed at what God revealed to me. For the first time, my heart beat with a purpose, knowing He was setting me free. I'm finally free, free to live life with abandon, free to sing the song He fashioned in me. I'm finally free, free to dance through His creation, free to love and no hesitation in me. I'm finally free. Finally free. I'm finally free. He took the pieces of my life my heart no longer held on to, and began to heal the wounds they left behind. Still I'm fooled into believing life is mine to control. Some lessons take a lifetime to learn, but time and again He reminds me He is the great I am. He holds my present and future. True freedom is in
See, be, care, share, gifts and more. Nature Explore. For the children in your life, visit Nature Explore at arborday.org.